Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, a.k.a. Dubdeuce85, joined by my co-host, partner in crime, Jake Kushek. He's been at the driver's seat handling all of the weekday action and showdown college football content while I'm doing my thing with college basketball. Definitely a long grind. I am finding not enough hours in the day as a parent of multiple kids. I can tell you that's busy enough, and then you add in the mix a couple of sports and a day job, and it gets real tricky. So I'm thankful to have Jake for this as we break down the main slate today on the show. There will be content for the two-gamer tomorrow as well, if you guys are grinding the weekday thing, along with college basketball. Not only will we be doing tonight's show for the main slate breakdown, but I'll be back tomorrow to do college basketball breakdown for the Saturday slate, and then a Q&A show Saturday morning at 8 a.m. PST for that main slate, while we talk about injuries and last-minute news and lineup construction and all that good stuff. So a lot going on, a lot to talk about. And Jake, I'm really happy that the Thursday is here, and we're going to talk about Saturday stuff and get people ready to make some money on PrizePicks, bets, and of course DFS. How you feeling about things?
Yeah, man, busy week of football for sure. Even busier for you doing double duty on the basketball side of things. But that's what action's all about. I mean, getting excited about football on a Tuesday, Wednesday night. Had some crazy action games. Don't know how closely you followed along with it, but definitely some weather in play affecting games and some teams scoring a heck of a lot of points that don't always do that. It was pretty interesting on the action slates. And then probably mentioned last Saturday, not on the main slate, but on the late night. So now it's the Hawaii slate. Got pretty close to a takedown on that with a Charbonnet, Holani, Calvin Tyler, and Elijah Higgins all lined up in one. Didn't get every last little piece right. If I'd switched somebody else at all for DTR who did not have a ceiling DTR game, probably would have gotten that takedown. So that was a fun one to be sweating up at like 10:30 p.m. waiting for those points to come in.
Yeah, definitely. And I played a little bit of Mac. I didn't play as heavy as I normally do. I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit for the weekday stuff, but I was really coming away this week impressed with the Miami quarterback Avion Smith. Man, that dude is awesome. Really like the way that
and that was fairly late news. Like it was like a Gabbard is questionable kind of thing. Like we knew we were gonna have to watch it, and maybe we get some news, maybe we don't get any news. And it was like maybe an hour before lock that we got that it wasn't going to be Gabbard. And I actually didn't go that route and kind of regretting it because he started a little bit slow, but certainly turned things on. And anytime you have that dual threat ability, there's always ground to be gained in the MAC. So.
Yeah, definitely. That was just a fun. I didn't really have a lot riding on that game. I just was watching some of his stuff, and I was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. And of course, Bangora, he did his thing. So lots of good stuff going on. If you guys are watching live or on demand, depending on what it is, please make sure you hit the like button. I don't want to be that guy said on last show begging for likes, but we're having a pretty good amount of views, and they're not getting a lot of likes. If you like the video, it just helps our stuff get seen when people search certain terms. It pops up, and I know you guys are supporting us so much, but we want to get some additional support as well, and not just have us all to yourselves. I know my man Aquasaw there's checking us out here, the NC State fanboy that I got, and he doesn't want to share the info with people, so I get it. But please definitely keep supporting us by liking the video. So we're going to do our position by position thing. Here's 14 games. we'll do, kind of our top three as we do, and then kind of spitball at the end and talk about, each position and any additional GPP likes, anybody we're looking at that, maybe we don't think the field is, anybody that maybe the field is that we're not, our drill by now. And then we'll talk prize picks, any betting stuff, and then just kind of yam it up a little bit at the end and head on out. So let's dive in here. We'll talk quarterbacks. I know you're sharp. You've been doing the CFB research all week. I have just kind of, been studying the main slate a little bit, not as much the weekday. So my brain's zoned in here, but let's have you start us off with with quarterbacks, and it's another Ohio State slate. So I'm always curious to see where you stand on them as they're facing a Maryland team they can throw on. But this slate has a lot of good games. So curious to see where you stand with the various quarterbacks.
So I'm trying to not let my personal biases affect things too much with regard to Stroud, and not just from like a fanboy perspective, but he also is going to be the one guy that kills my season long prize picks on his yardage over. He needs about 500 yards in the next two games, 500 yards each game in the next two games to hit that over. So. Not looking great. He's going to need to set some records against Maryland to even have a shot at it, because it's going to be a much tougher defense he'll be facing the following weeks. Not quite 500. He needs like 440 per game. So, if he gets to like 550 against Maryland, which like if they just let him throw all day, he'll get there. So I'll probably throw one Stroud and Harrison lineup in there just in case, they do completely take the reins off. It's like at a certain point in the season, you can't just like keep benching the guy in the fourth quarter, because like the season's going to be over, right? Like you got to let him pile on the stats and get me to buy prize picks over. That's, it's kind of selfish, but style points too. I mean, the reality is, with the CFP, the way things are structured, even if they lose to Michigan and Michigan somehow ends up losing in the Big Ten championship, I don't know that a one-loss Ohio State team that only lost to Michigan would necessarily be completely eliminated from the CFP. And then you really do get into the style points argument, right? So not that Ryan Day needs any additional motivation to run up the score a little bit. And we saw that last week with them still throwing. They got, was it Cam Babb, his first career touchdown after 4 ACL surgeries in the fourth quarter there with not much time left. So definitely not a main lineup play, but we could see, a little bit closer to a ceiling game from Stroud. Just trying to make up statistically from that Northwestern game. So that it's not one of my three, but it's worth mentioning because you kind of kicked it off with that. The guy I'm the most excited about, way down at 6,200, Holton Ellers, the absolute nut matchup against Houston, playing at home. He's been like a solid 20 to 25 point guy, except for the game against USF. And if there's a team that is kind of similar to Houston with regard to they're just going to give up whatever you want to do to them, it's USF, right? They're similar to Houston from a defensive perspective, and it can't all be Keaton Mitchell. When we get into the running back section, we're going to talk about him too. But usually we see Ehlers, and he's got some rushing touchdowns too. I think he put like 3 in one game or 2 in one game, something like that. What is it? 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. So he's able to score on the ground. He's not a guy that's going to run for hundreds of yards on the ground. I think his top rushing total is 48. So you're not playing him for that. You're playing him for the upside to the exposure of this passing game, and with Winstead and Johnson flashing the way that they tend to flash against the Houston defense that stops absolutely no one and piles on the points themselves, that's a really good place to start and open up some salary cap for the rest of your lineup. And then there's another dude that's been kind of a brand favorite over at North Carolina State, MJ Morris. Didn't didn't quite have it against BC, and that was a little bit disappointing because he put together two very, very solid games in a row with Virginia Tech and Wake, and we wanted to see that continue against what has typically been a pretty attackable defense, especially through the air in BC, and didn't quite get there. Did score once on the ground and did score once through the air. Efficiency wasn't there. He fumbled 3 times, lost all of them. So giving away the ball, you can't do that. But if we look at the track record of what he's done, and then look at the fact that he's playing Louisville, which is again one of those defenses that you can just absolutely attack any which way. I really like him at 5,700 too. And then if we are going to talk about somebody that's a little bit more traditionally priced, but still kind of on the cheaper end of things, I'm going back and forth because I don't know what version of Jalen Daniels that we're going to see. If we knew for sure we were going to get early season Jalen Daniels that was rushing 10 plus times a game and scoring multiple touchdowns on the ground and throwing for 300 yards at the same time, that would be like the biggest lock of all the locks. But I don't know that we're going to get that. Even if I assume he's going to be starting, and he's getting more and more reps is what is coming through the tea leaves. But I just don't think that he's going to be as aggressive rushing the ball. I would love to go there. Instead, going to go back to another phenomenal matchup in what for me is somewhat of a brand favorite in Cam Ward, going up against Arizona that everybody has just thrown for ungodly amounts of yards against Arizona. And they've, for the most part, been able to keep up, other than that Utah game. Right. So should see Cam Ward kind of show out and hopefully get to a very Sam Hartman-esque 300-yard, 3-touchdown kind of game at 6,800. So I am cheap across the board at quarterback. And I'm interested to see, other than Stroud, which obviously we need our weekly dose of Stroud exposure, but I'm curious to see what direction you're going, if you're also trying to go cheap and spend money elsewhere, or if there's some pay-ups that you're looking at.
Yeah, so it's pretty boring at quarterback because I think, and it won't be a secret, I think, 6'2" sitting there at Holton Oilers, I think he's going to be pretty relatively high owned. So I don't have anything to add there. 6'2" is just underpriced. Houston can't defend anyone coming into the season. I thought, I'll just say me, I don't know how others thought, but I thought Houston had a chance to be this year's Cincinnati. That quickly was not the case. Their defense was totally awful. They can't stop anyone. And yeah, Holton's just going to go crazy. So 1v1 there, I'm right lockstep with you. He's the QB1, whether I'm doing 1 quarterback lineup, 2 quarterback lineup, he's going to be in there. I do like the Morris call. I was debating if I was going to put him in my top 3 or not, because I don't know if I want to do 2 quarterbacks. If I do, I think, MJ Morris is really nice. So I'm pretty much locked up with you on the first 2. I do like in the same game there against ECU, Clayton Tune, a little bit higher in price at 8-1, but still relatively nice. I think he could be a nice GPP play. ECU is giving up right around 265, 270 yards per game through the air. Michael Pratt, who was on the slate tonight, he's really kind of known more as a rushing quarterback, especially lately. He lit ECU up for 300 plus yards, which he doesn't do that quite as much now. He did that a couple times earlier this season. Of course, in an overtime game against Memphis, Seth Hennigan threw for 400 plus and 2 touchdowns against them. The UCF game, it was pretty rough, but still John Rice Plumlee, our guy JRP, they got blown out, but he threw for almost 300 yards. He got picked off 3 times, but still threw for the yardage. Jaron Hall threw for a couple touchdowns, and then Ben Bryant last game that they played 250 and 2. So quarterbacks are having a nice time against ECU. I don't think there's going to be a 80 to 70 type of game or anything like we saw when Houston SMU played, but you look at Tune and he churned out another 30 plus fantasy points right after that in his encore game after SMU. Mordecai's had a couple of clunkers now, including tonight, which wasn't great. And I think that, Tune is just a guy that they're allowing to throw the football a ton. He has enough rushing upside to, pop off at that point. And for, the 111 against SMU is probably more of an anomaly, but anywhere from 25 to 40 rushing yards, just to add that in there, that helps. He gets rushing touchdowns. That obviously helps. Over 3,000 yards now, 31 touchdowns, only picked off 8 times. Feels like he's been picked off a lot more. I think it's because he's been throwing a lot more interceptions lately. But I think Tune and Eilers make a really nice kind of game stack there, and those two going, at each other. So that'll be a nice little GPP look there. So I'll throw him in my top 3. And then I'll have Morris kind of like on the cusp, maybe 3A, 3B. And then the other quarterback there that I could consider as a third option here, and I'm kind of, interested in against this West Virginia defense is back to Will Howard, and he's sitting there at 6'4". Adrian Martinez isn't going to play, so we don't have to worry about that. I like this Kansas State offense a hell of a lot more with Will Howard under center. I know that sounds weird to say, but Howard has come in against TCU, 225, 2 touchdowns, followed it up with 296 and 4, and then against Baylor, 196 and 3. The rushing yards haven't been there like we've seen in the past from him. He does have that ability though, and another cheap quarterback at 6'4". West Virginia's been awful. They're just defensively and offensively they're a really subpar, mediocre team, and I think Howard could definitely dice them up a little bit, and we'll go relatively low owned because the majority of the field's going to be going with Holton, as they should. So it sounds like to me we're on the same page with going cheap at quarterback, which means that's probably going to be a lot of what the industry does, and it's going to be more contrarian to go with CJ Stroud because, no one's going Stetson Bennett. At 8'8", it's just comical that they even put him there, so you can just rule that out as being an option. And then I think we'll see a dabbling of like Tune and then the next tier of guys, which is, Duggan, Delora, and your guy Ward. So it's definitely a going cheap at quarterback type of situation. Where if I'm running 1 or 2, I'm probably not paying up more than, a combined salary of like $13K. And that kind of excites me. But at the same time, it doesn't, because we're going to have a lot of overlap this week. And I just hate that when that happens. So, I'm Mr. Anti-Chalk. So we can definitely pay up at running back this week, which was something we weren't in lockstep on last week. So we'll see how we are this week going into it. But what are some other quarterbacks that you're looking at here? Maybe like a Jaden Delora or, Hacksaw. Any of those guys stick out?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you mentioned Tune, because like that game does seem kind of like the game to game stack, right? And like you do want to be able to do that if possible, if you're able to get there on the salary. I think you get a lot of the Tune upside by using Tank Dell, and so I kind of would rather just use Tank Dell and differentiate elsewhere, and not have to, pay an exorbitant amount for quarterback. But I think for the upside of, in case you do get like a 52 to 45 type game, and he does happen to rush one in or something like that. If you can find the pieces elsewhere to pay that premium, it's interesting. And then, other than that, man, I haven't done it all year with Hacksaw. I don't know that I'm going to start now. I like the running back too much. I'm going to go to Kendrick Miller too much, and they're kind of like negatively correlated with each other because he's not super involved in passing game. He gets some, but like it's not one of those backs that's getting like 7 or 8 catches every time. The only other one that we didn't talk about, and I keep kind of pumping him up, waiting for him to have like that big explosive game, and he just hasn't done it. And that's Ewers. And he's just been, it's not like he's played bad football. He just has not been very good from a fantasy perspective. So I don't know. I think I'm going to stick mainly with the 3 that I mentioned, and then Stroud up top. I think those other ones are kind of just like filler GPP dart type moves.
Yeah, I definitely think it's shaping up for me to be, a classic 1 quarterback slate, or Will Howard. I'll have to decide how that shakes out. And if I love Deuce Vaughn too much, then I won't need to play Howard. So let's move on to running backs. There are a plethora of pay-ups that look good. You got Bijan, who's always in play, even though he's expensive, facing off against Kansas. He's probably going to score 3 touchdowns. Just have to weigh how much yardage is going to come in there. Blake Corum's there at 8.5. He came through with another pretty solid game last week, even though, it was a blowout. He had another 150-plus yards.
A little better than Donovan Edwards. I don't know if there were any analysts in the industry that were all about Donovan Edwards last week, but man, those guys really got it wrong.
Yeah, that was a tough one. And then Chase Brown, who is dealing with a leg injury, but they do think he's going to play. Those two kind of canceling each other out. Illinois versus Michigan. It is going to be a real violent running game, so those two will probably get assuming Brown plays, a lot of touches, but I don't know if I want to necessarily go there with the way those teams play and how slow it's going to be. I feel like there's going to be a lack of carries overall. So looking down the list here, I think it starts for me with Deuce Vaughn, and I felt bad because I haven't used Deuce as much. Like last year, it was always like the Deuce is loose every week. It was plug and play. Didn't care about matchup. Didn't care about price. Comes into it with a new quarterback with Amart, and he had some nice games. Like he had a 30 early in the season, but a bunch of like 17s and 19s, and like that's okay. But man, when we think of Deuce Vaughn, we're thinking of slate breaking performances, and with Will Howard under center now, the last 3 games, we're seeing the Deuce Vaughn of 2021 FTN favorite. Damn near 40 fantasy points in week 9. Follows it up with 29 against Texas, 32 the week after. All of those games, multiple touchdowns, whether that's, back to the receiving side or rushing the football. We're seeing his receiving numbers are way up. He really wasn't catching the ball at all with Amart. And then, the last 3 games, he has 4+ receptions in each of the last 3, scored a receiving touchdown. So at 7.4, that's underpriced. West Virginia, they're, again, I kind of harped on them how bad they are. They're giving up a lot of yards of offense to opponents, about 150 yards in the ground. But I think Deuce Vaughn, he's such a versatile weapon that he's going to beat them in a myriad of ways. I think he probably becomes the surefire RB1 here and will be popular. Somebody in a similar price point that's going to be the number 2 back for me, at least at this moment, is another guy that we were heavy on last year. And I don't feel like I'm trying to think of a time I used him this season. And I don't think I have in my main, GPP lineups, whatever. But the youngster that is Braylon Allen for Wisconsin, it's another guy last year. This is redemption week for me, going back to guys from last year. Just haven't been using him at all. His price has been kind of too high. The Wisconsin, they haven't been on the slate the last couple of weeks, but when they are, the matchups just kind of, mediocre, or his price has been so high where it's like, I just can't quite fit him. But you look through and see what he's done. He's had some good games. He kind of rolled up on Purdue, had a 113-yard, 1 touchdown game, had a couple touchdowns against Sparty, had 100+ yards against Maryland. Iowa, he got shut down for sure. And I think that there's a lot of thoughts in the industry that, he's kind of risky because touches aren't there as much. He's kind of, not running him to the ground like they did last year, but he's still getting a decent amount of work. He's catching passes. The Wisconsin passing game is definitely better than it was last year, not by much, but it's better. And that's affected him a little bit, but he gets this just really good matchup against Nebraska. And it's a situation where he's probably not going to get, it's kind of like with the early season, Mo Ibrahim, we're all worried about, he's going to have lack of touches, but Mo's, on 20 carries, all of a sudden he's putting up 150 and 3. Like Braylon Allen's not going to need more than 15 to 20 carries against Nebraska to dominate here. The price of 7K is the lowest it's been in quite some time, since the beginning of the season, actually since week 2. So we're getting a slight discount on him. He's going to go overlooked because of the guys that are around him, with Deuce Vaughn. Keaton Mitchell has been really popular the last couple of slates. You got Devin Neal down there. You got the pay-ups. There's a bunch of Kendre Miller, who the industry always ignores. Seems like only me and you are the ones playing Kendre Miller every week. But there's a lot of good names around him, and I just think he's going to go overlooked, and people are going to be like, well, how many carries will he actually get against Nebraska? And I just don't care about that. I think if he gets, 15 at least, I'm feeling pretty confident that he's going to go for 25+. And at 7K, he doesn't need to have 40 to really, melt the slate and go crazy. If you get that 25 out of him, you're going to be feeling pretty good and probably cashing most of your single entry stuff with the opportunity for more. So he's the second guy for me. And then, the cheapies, I'm always leery of cheap guys. Levine ended up coming through last week. it was Kamar Wheaton came through as well. He could have played either of them. But coming into it, Nakia Watson as a value guy, if you do want to pay up as at quarterback for whatever reason or a wide receiver, you do have him, former Wisconsin kid, but 3.8 has back-to-back games over 100 yards. They're really starting to use him more. The opponents have been a lot easier. He's faced two of the worst rushing defenses in the Pac-12 the last couple of weeks. Coincidentally, he had his best games of the season. Going up against Arizona, it's another pretty bad defense overall. So I think at 3.8, he's definitely a guy you can use. You want one of those high expensive wide receivers we're going to get to in a second. You can definitely put him in next to, a guy like Bijan or these mid-tier running backs that I'm really excited about in the 6 to 7K range. And you're not going to be giving up a lot because at least he's going to get 12 to 18 carries at minimum. I know that range is a little bit wide, but at 3.8, how much do you really need? He's had 20 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. And the carries have been in double digits every single game except for the USC game, which just, they got down fast and it turned into a passing fest. So I feel pretty secure about Nakia Watson if you need value. So those are the 3 guys I'm looking at, but there are many more I like on this slate. So we'll see who you like, and then we'll get into the rest of who I am. But I think it might be an RB4 week for me.
You talked about more than 3. Just so I don't talk about any of the same 3. Watson was the last one. And
yeah, so it's I didn't talk. I'm name dropping them isn't really like giving them as a play, but yeah. So the 3 are Deuce Vaughn, Braylon Allen, and Nakia Watson. Those are my 3 locked and loaded running backs at this current moment.
So those were also my 3. So I'm gonna have to.
We're in lockstep this week. All right.
I'm gonna have to pivot pretty quick. So
we'll go right into the additional period then.
So I mean, and this is not necessarily needed as part of game stacking, but certainly something I would do if game stacking is including Keaton Mitchell, because as mentioned, you can do whatever you want to Houston, and they give Keaton Mitchell the rock plenty, and he's ultra efficient, above 6.5 yards a carry each of the last 3 weeks, including on the road against BYU and Cincy. BYU obviously hasn't stopped many people this year, but Cincy is usually regarded as, at least a decent, if not, above average or elite defense. Obviously they've been a little bit less than that this year, but still for Mitchell to be able to keep up that kind of efficiency, scored in each of the last 4 weeks, has a total of 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks, has had more involvement in the passing game earlier in the season, kind of tapered off a bit, but still very much, involved at 7-1. I think that's a fair, if not, slightly discounted price on the volume that I think we're going to see from Keaton Mitchell. And then let's see. Another guy that I don't know why, but no one ever seems to care for. And maybe it's because he's been terrible, for most of the season, other than the last few weeks, is Devin Neal against, Texas defense that can be run on, especially with them getting Jalen Daniels back. Texas probably going to have to key a little bit more on that than they would with Bean back there. And Devin Neal scored 51 points 2 weeks ago, 27 last week, and he's 6'4". I don't know that there's many guys on the slate that have a 51-point game this season. Certainly not very many that are under 7K. So that's another one that I would have some interest in. And then Will Shipley just gets volume, man. And he did fumble twice last game against Louisville, and they had that one pretty well wrapped up. So we didn't see the high ceiling game from him that we see when he gets to like that 25 plus carry level, but still gets in the end zone a good amount. At 6'5", he's not extremely expensive. Clemson playing at home. Is Miami's quarterback good to go, or is he still hurt?
I think he's trending to play, but we'll see. I don't think it's official yet.
I don't know that it matters, man. I think I think Clemson takes that one pretty easily.
Yeah.
And I think, Will Shipley's going to be pretty much involved. And then the last one I'll throw in, just because we were on him early in the season, and then kind of faded away. Didn't really talk about it a whole lot, and then he's had a couple blow up games recently. Nick Singleton against Rutgers just seems like a complete explosion spot, especially if they don't have Kavonte Lee again, and it's just him and Allen that are getting touches, right? He's he's going to get at least double-digit touches, and that's kind of it's kind of all he needs at that price point, and only 200 more than Allen. Allen actually saw more carries last week, but Singleton was much more efficient, going for 11 carries, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns, as opposed to Katron Allen. 16 for 73 is not terrible either, but I'm riding with the guy who's getting the scores, and Singleton got his early in the game. So maybe they let him play in the third quarter and he gets up to 200 yards and a third score in this one. You never know. So that's another one that in that, around 6K range that is of interest.
Yeah, at this point with the Penn State running backs, I'm just, every week I'm kind of like, man, there's a good spot. I want to use one, but it's so hard to pick them out. And yeah, last week it was Singleton, and they priced them within 200 of each other. I think that'll be like an afternoon slate thing for me where I'll get my exposure there, but I love that spot for them. Also Trey Day, man, he assuming he's good to go. 6'3".
There's no way that they run him out for volume carries before Michigan.
Yeah, you're probably right, but Jesus, that 6'3" price is so.
I know. I saw that too, and I was like, he's gonna get like 8 to 10 touches, and maybe he breaks one on one of them, but yeah, they're gonna shut him down after that. Like this is his exhibition for Michigan week.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely probably not a main team play, but that they're setting a serious trap there, because I think he could get some ownership based off name alone there. So I'll tread carefully there. Dallin Hayden, of course, he finally had the breakout game that we've been waiting for, and this could turn into a situation where if it gets out of hand early, they turn the ball over to Hayden again. So still going to be carries galore, but geez, man. Somebody that backfield's going to put up some points. I just don't know who's going to be getting.
They scored so efficiently in the game last week, though, that they kept throwing. Like their final drive of the fourth quarter, they were still throwing the ball. Yeah. So I don't know that it's as foot off the gas, just hand it off to Hayden a bunch of times starting in the third quarter as they might seem. I think part of that is to pump Stroud up, and part of that is to keep them sharp for a Michigan game, no mercy, that kind of attitude. So I'm it's not hard for me to do it, but I'm kind of talking myself into maybe more than one Stroud lineup as we go through this.
Yeah, definitely. If you think it's going to go that way and they won't run it as much, then yeah, it's starting to seem like he might need to be used. And then going back over here, in that Houston ECU game, we're talking, stacks possibly. Stacey Sneed sits there at 3.8 coming off his big game. He's actually the last couple of weeks had some pretty big carries, 20, 10, and then he had 11 last week against Temple, which was a big game for him, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has scored 5 touchdowns in the past 3 games. There's still, Campbell, who early the season, he was looking like the guy, hasn't, played, or he didn't get any touches or any snaps the last couple. And then Tajon Henry, who has been banged up like most of his career, it seems like, came in and played a little bit against Temple. I don't think he's going to necessarily take a bunch of carries. So I think Sneed's going to end up still getting 12 plus touches at minimum. Another guy at 3.8. If we think that Watson's going to be chalky, which I do, that makes sense as kind of a pivot in GPPs in a game that there's going to be a lot of points. And you could even maybe, talk about your man, Marlon Gunn there at 3.5 as a GPP guy you could break a touchdown and, potentially put up 10 plus fantasy points. So there's a lot to like for game stack potential there. And then every week we talk about Notre Dame. I'd love to be able to use one of them because this is another good spot against a Boston College team that just the wheels have fallen off. But we're in the same situation again. Prices are great. Like Logan Diggs at 4.6. Like, man, that's a really good price. And he could very well be like, 25 for 140 and a touchdown, but he could very well have 13 carries. I think the only thing that I know between the three of them is that Tyree is just out of the picture, not getting carries, and then Estime and Diggs are going to kind of trade off on their touches. So Estime at 5.7 is not as interesting to me, but Logan Diggs at 4.6 is a guy that I think will go under owned and could potentially, hang 20 plus on this Boston College team. It's just a damn shame what they did to Tyree in what is, I think, his last season. Still pretty upset about that. And then, Kendre Miller, it's a technically a bad spot, I suppose, against Baylor on the road, but Baylor's defense hasn't been that good. Kendre Miller at this point deserves the matchup proof label. Just when you think, oh, he's only going to get these 12 to 15 carries, he's Mr. Efficient, which he has been. They pop him for 21 carries in back-to-back weeks. He performs really well, 130 plus yards, scores a touchdown every week. If you can find a decent number on a Kendre Miller anytime touchdown, take it because he never stops scoring. I can only find like minus 130, minus 140 in places. It's still good enough to take, I guess. And at 6.8, he hasn't been priced up just enough to completely fade yet, and I think he'll again be under owned, which he is every single week, but he keeps producing on a weekly basis, and just the matchup against Baylor doesn't scare me at this point. So I think that's pretty much it for running backs. Do you think like if Chase Brown's out, would you want to have any interest in those guys, or is it just they're going to get stuffed in the locker anyways? Josh McCray is banged up. Like, I don't know who they would use. Reggie Love, I suppose.
I want no part of either side of Michigan, Illinois.
Yeah, that's about where I am too. All right, so moving on, we have the wide receivers, some expensive options, which if we have cheap quarterbacks, we have a couple cheap running backs, we can afford these guys. So where are you starting at with the wide receivers?
Tank Dell, lock it in. Top of the price, top of everything. I'll go ahead and give my prediction now as opposed to any of the show. I'm gonna say 15,203 for Tank Dell. Which last time I did a prediction like that was JSN, and JSN went for 15,303 in the Rose Bowl. So maybe Tank Dell can even beat that JSN game. So yeah, man. I mean, like, just such a perfect spot for him to do all the things. I know that Matthew Golden's been a little bit more involved. I'm also interested in Matthew Golden. He's not going to be one of my three because that's just kind of like game stacking and cheating. But I do like him as well. But yeah, what's there to say at this point? He hasn't had less than 20 DraftKings points since week 3. And he's in a nut matchup, getting like 17 targets a game. You could make him 10,000. I would still play, especially with all the cheap running backs we have. Everyone else is like just so much lower. It's hard for me to think of like who's my second guy. It's like a large gap between Tank Dell and the second guy. But I think the second guy is going to be on the other side of that game. Isaiah Winstead has kind of been not shut down, but certainly not like hitting any ceiling games lately. Against UCF, they were ahead, ran the ball a whole bunch. He still got to like 7 catches for 89 yards. So not a terrible game. Like if you get in the end zone once, that's like a decent fantasy game. The last 2, very, very low production in competitive games. And I think that's, probably the product of a lot of attention being, sent his way. What doesn't scare me about that continuing to happen in this one is that Houston could give him all the attention in the world and it wouldn't matter because he would still score touchdowns. Because they don't really have the scheme or type of ability to shut down an alpha type receiver. And CJ Johnson is fine too. CJ Johnson has splits pretty drastically, and for whatever reason is like the guy that gets it done on the road. I don't know how much we want to believe in that, but like just has had one massive game at home and the rest of them all been on the road. For a GPP lineup, I don't mind going Johnson over Winstead. For a main lineup, I think Winstead's going to be a lot more reliable, and he's going to be my number 2 guy. And then number 3, God, I'm really trying to pick someone that's not in that game. Let's go with now. Do we know for sure that Farrell from Washington State is out and not going to play in this one?
I haven't seen a tweet on that says he's definitively out. No.
Okay.
Sure, we'll see one in the next half a day, though.
So contingently, I'm going to have Stribling in as my third guy to go with those Cam Ward lineups. Which, you know, if you're playing Watson, which you probably are, it's a lot of Washington State to throw in you know a game that most folks might not think is going to be like the highest total of the week, but everybody just gets it done in all facets against Arizona. And if you're playing Ward, so you know, and he was my third quarterback, I like Stribling. I don't think anyone will be on Stribling given the slate construction. People are going to want to pay up a wide receiver, and he's in kind of that no man's land. And I seem to be very much on the Washington State attack, so I think that that fits in pretty well, especially if we get confirmation that Farrell is out, and you know Stribling can kind of take over as the target hog once again in that offense.
Yeah, so it's a pretty even week. Like, we're on the same page here. I mean, Dell, I think we're going to be in a lot of the industry's going to have the same guys. Dell, definitely. Winstead, definitely. Like, I don't know how we don't have every receiver from this game. It's going to be tough not to. I will say that I'm starting to consider playing Dell and Sam Brown, which means the NFL guys would tell me I have to play Clayton Tune. So that might come to fruition, because Samuel Brown is 4-2 for Houston. He's not necessarily piped the second spot from Golden, but my God, his targets, you know, since he, you know, has really started playing more snaps since week 5, 5 targets, 11, 7, 7, 9, and 11 last week. And he's been producing at a pretty high level. This passing game is really out of control. He's not hitting like 100 yards or anything, but just super consistent, 5 to 6 receptions, a lot of high, you know, percentage throws going his way. You know, he has 2 games in his last 4 with multiple touchdowns. So 4-2, we are going to have a lot of salary to play with this week. And now it's starting to be like, well, shit, do I need to play Bijan? So I like him. I like Dell. If I'm going to play those guys, conventional wisdom says I have to go roll back and play Tune. But I think he's got to be a guy that is, you know, it's not top 3 or 4. With the fact that Bijan fade scares me, I think I would have to, with all the salary I have at my disposal, go with a Texas wide receiver. This Kansas defense is pretty suspect. Xavier Worthy is only 6'5". He has, you know, not had the season that maybe I expected or a lot of other people expected him to have, closer to like a Josh Downs or a you know, even Tank Dell. Like, just that consistent production hasn't been there. The yardage hasn't been there. What has been there is the touchdowns. He's scoring them at an alarmingly high rate. He has 6 in his last 5. I think that continues to happen. I think he'll score another one, possibly 2, if we can get his yardage up a little bit. But I think he's kind of locked into these, like, you know, 7 for 70 in a score games, and those are just fine at 6.5. And like I said, if I'm fearful of fading Bijan, which I typically am each week, this gives me a way to get exposure to that and hope that, you know, hey, if the touchdowns don't come to him, then they're probably going to come to Xavier Worthy if they're going to throw the ball a little bit more. So he is in my top 3 there at 6'5". I'd love it to be, you know, Jason, because he's also a really good play at 4 or 5. He's been producing at a high level, double-digit fantasy points pretty much in 5 of his last 6. Everyone's caught up now and they know who he is. His price is kind of higher now, so I'm going to use, Worthy if I'm going to use a Texas guy in general. So I'm with you on Dell, one of Winstead, and then Worthy, with Samuel Brown being right on that cusp there, because then I'm going to end up having a total game stack, and I like stacking, but it's kind of boring to talk about. So not a lot of differences with where our head stands this week, which is either going to go really, really well, or it's going to be a situation where like, oh shoot, it's 14 games and every single guy I have is 40% owned.
No, what's going to happen is Lad McConkey is going to turn an ankle in the first quarter, and Brock Bowers is going to go for like 203, and we're going to go, man. The 1 week we don't talk about Brock Bowers at all.
For sure. All right, so that kind of opens it up to the the chatter here. I do want to mention that Zay Flowers is a guy we've been on a lot. His price is 6'9", which I think is a good GPP look for him. He's been way too low most of the season, so they finally got him priced relatively appropriately after he's just banging out these 30s. Not a great matchup for him against Notre Dame, but we know the targets are going to be coming his way regardless of game script, and they're just going to continue to pepper him. He's very close to 1,000-yard season. I think we see him have a flirt with 100+ yards at relatively low ownership. 6'9", it's a tough price, but definitely a GPP play for Zay Flowers. So don't want to forget about him either, much like Brock Bowers. Who else?
And then the other guy that I hope to get a mention, obviously Harrison. If you need a stacking partner for your Stroud lineups, Harrison and Igbuka. I'm going to go with Harrison every day of the week and twice on Saturday. Just nothing against Igbuka, but Stroud loves throwing to Harrison, and he's pretty darn efficient when he gets it. So that's an obvious one, and then a probably less obvious one. And if you end up somehow stacking the NC State Louisville game, did you get a hold of Tyler Hudson's line against Clemson? Did you happen to catch any of that?
I didn't see it, but I looked and saw what it was, but I didn't see him like any of his highlights or anything.
Yeah, well, so
games actually.
Once it was no longer Malik in there, and actually even he caught some balls in the first half too, but once it was no longer Malik, it was like Tyler Hudson could just could not be stopped. And so if they go back to is it Doman or Doman?
Yeah, Brock Doman.
They go back to him, and shut Malik down. Could just be peppering Tyler Hudson with like 25 targets all game against an NC State defense that isn't quite what it has been in the past either. So could be interesting at 6'8", a guy that I think will probably be sub 5% ownership. That probably is going to have quite a bit of target share.
Yeah, he's actually been kind of breaking out the last few games. He had a nice game against James Madison too, so he's finally getting some good looks, and that offense is having some passing going their way. And Doman, I actually kind of really like him. Probably not enough to play him just yet, but he's looked good in the minimum time that he has played, and he's made some good throws. And I know he's had some interceptions that actually weren't his fault. But the Louisville program sounds like talking to them. They're ready to move on. Malik's been awesome, but I think a lot of people want to see what Doman can do. So
yeah, when I was first kind of looking at quarterbacks, I actually kind of was starting to trend towards looking at him. And then I was like, you know what, Ellers is 300 more. I think I can get there in a much better, much more secure spot. So
yeah, definitely. Some other GPP looks, in non-Braylon Allen lineups, I think you'd want to hope for some receiving touchdowns to happen. That would be either Skylar Bell, who I really like as a future piece, or Shamiri Dike, who has been able to really blossom as the number one option in the passing game. Been pretty quiet the last few weeks. That passing offense has not really been there, as it's simply not. But he does have a 50 to his name, a bunch of double digits, so he's got some good upside, and Skylar Bell has some nice touchdown equity in times in this offense. So both of them in the mid 5K range against a really porous Nebraska team. That game's just going to go really, overlooked because of this ECU game and some of the other spots. Arizona's nice. Obviously the Kansas State spot. Like there's some good matchups for teams here. And I know the Badgers aren't known for their offense, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them hang a pretty hearty, 30-plus point game against Nebraska. And with 3 guys coming out of here with high fantasy scores. So if you're not playing Braylon Allen, I think you want to have exposure to one of those guys, Bell or DK at GPP wise.
What do you think of Braden Lindsey at 3.8 finally getting some involvement and going up against a beatable BC defense?
No. The last 2 games have been nice. I did notice that. Notre Dame has been so awful. Outside of Mayer, they've played so many different guys and rotated different guys. Styles was hot for a while, but Lindsey's a known commodity that we know, and he's a capable pass catcher if he gets the target. So, if that continues like it has in the Navy game, and then he had a nice one against a couple weeks before that against UNLV. I don't hate it. GPP wise, 3.8. That's another low rostered value play that's in that same range as Nakia Watson and some of those other 3-5 guys we mentioned that no one's going to use. So we know Boston College sucks. The question is, can Drew Pine actually take advantage of that trashy defense? He did against Navy, so that was good to see. He's capable. So I don't mind Lindsey.
Yeah, it was not that I think I'm going to have a cheap receiver in any lineup, but that was one of them that I was considering as a potential option.
Yeah. I think Brown's really the only one from Houston that I think I would want, but I don't know how I'm going to fit where I would put him. And then the Kansas receivers for GPP wise really depends on what's going to happen at quarterback there. But Texas secondary continues to be really awful between Grimm, Arnold, and Skinner. Their prices are kind of realistic to where they should be. Skinner's 4.5. That has interest for me. Arnold at 5.4 and Grimm at 5.7. However, I can't sit here and tell you which one of the 3 would actually be able to do the damage because they do rotate around, and it's a kind of a tough thing to pinpoint. Quarterback play has been kind of all over the place. Bean's done well, but Daniels comes back. We just don't know what the target share will look like. So GPP guys, between those 3, somebody will definitely come out. If I had to say one, I think it's Arnold. I kind of like him the best out of the 3, but I would plant my flag with it.
Could be Mason Fairchild as well.
Fairchild does well. Yes, he's running out of the. Is he he's a tight end, right? Doesn't he play tight end, or is he?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as a tight end with Daniels coming back, he was thrown to him early. But I think that's kind of the slate. We didn't even really, it's just strangely I thought like Maryland coming into the season, like their receiver room had a lot of hype. I thought like, damn, this is going to be a really nice season for them, but they just have not done that well. And considering the Buckeyes offense and what they'll do, Maryland's going to have to throw the ball a lot. And if you would have told me heading into the season that Dante Demas would be under 5K, in a matchup against Ohio State where they're going to throw the ball a lot, like I'd be telling you, wow, yeah, I'll definitely be rostering him. But now here we are in week 12, and no, I'm definitely not going to be rostering him. And last year he was so good before the injury, and I don't know if it's injury related still or what, but he does not look like the same guy. And that's sad for me.
Yeah, it is kind of rough, like thinking about what the Stroud lineup construction will look like and being like, okay, well, probably should bring it back with somebody, but then I have to pick from those clowns that haven't been able to do anything all year. Like I don't.
It's just so strange, man. It's really strange because that group should be really phenomenal and they're not, and it's tough. So, I think that's pretty much it. I think core, we don't even really have to go into core. I mean, we're pretty lockstep there. I think between Eilers as a top QB, running backs our group, and Dell as the top wide receiver. So you guys watching us at home there, we're all feeling good about that group. And I think, as the weekend comes up in the next, 24 to 36 hours, there'll be some news that drops, of course, but I really want to stay on that group and maybe just one or two different, and regardless of how I own they are. And I think we'll coast into the profit this week. So I feel good about that. Let's hop over to PrizePicks and see what we can delve into here. I know that you've had some in the earlier part of the week. CBB, PrizePicks have been well for us. It wasn't great today, but that happens. Can't win 100% of the time. But what are some of the college football ones that you're looking at? I know some have probably changed, but what do you got going on?
Yeah. So just verifying that these are all still where I first saw them. So starting with Braylon Allen fantasy score at 18.5. So that's 100 yards or I guess 120 yards and a touchdown, and no receiving yards. So I think he gets to 120 yards and a touchdown, and probably gets multiple touchdowns against a pretty rough. And the thing about it is, it's not just that Nebraska's defense is bad; it's that their offense is bad, and they're not going to sustain drives, and he's going to get short fields, and they're just going to he's going to have a couple 40-yard touchdowns, and it's just going to be it's going to be over, and they're not going to feel the need to throw the ball a whole bunch. So 18.5 for Braylon Allen is pretty nice like that. The Blake Corum, and it is gross to take a Blake Corum under. I don't think that we've wanted to do that all year. 136.5 rushing yards in a game that doesn't really scream like massive offensive efficiency, and also in a game that they're going to want to at least save a little bit of Blake Corum for Ohio State week, and not necessarily run him into the ground with 30 carries. And Illinois has got pretty stout front that has been able to stop the run. So not a situation I like to be in, taking a Blake Corum under, but if there were ever a spot to do it, I do like that one at 136.5. Our boy Miller, that we've kind of been talking about, and everyone kind of ignores him. Same thing on the fantasy score side of things, 17.5. So 110 yards and a touchdown gets you there. And he also is good for a pass or two to be caught. So I think we can hit the over on that one pretty confidently. And then Ibra, kind of a similar scenario to to Corum. 135.5 against Iowa. Braylon Allen got completely shut down against Iowa, and I don't know that Minnesota is going to be a whole lot more successful than that. So I think it's a weird week when you have unders on both Corum and Ibra, just because they're such high volume backs. But I think this is a spot to kind of take advantage of where the market and their past success has taken them to these kind of unplayable heights. Let's put it this way: you definitely wouldn't take those overs, right? And so I think those are high enough. If they're closer to the 120 range, think about it a little bit more. But I think both those are high enough. You can be under pretty confidently on both Corum and Ibra. So those will be the ones that I'll start out with, and you can hit some, and I'll see if there's others later in the day that have stayed at the same number.
Yeah, man. The Kendre Miller fantasy total, it seems like they're always between 17 and 19. They never go to 20, and it's like he's just seems automatic for 20 plus. So that's one I like as well, because he's just doesn't miss. Jim just does not miss. All right. So my first one is actually maybe it would be strange. I don't know, but it's a Purdue player, but it's not from the passing side of things. It's the running back that they've pretty much turned it over to and given the keys to, Devin Mockobee, going against Northwestern. They have him at 74.5 rushing yards. He was able to churn out 106 versus a very tough Illini squad. And now he gets to face Northwestern. And this is a team that gives up 200 yards per game on the ground. So with his kind of volume, 20-ish carries or whatever, 74.5 will look pretty silly, because I think he could double that number against Northwestern. So that's the first one I like, 74.5. That just seems really low to me. unless I'm missing, some kind of he's hurt or there's something else in play that just seems very, very off. I do like the receiving yards for I'm always using Elijah Cooks on the late night slate, and that will continue, although I don't know how late that game actually is. 68.5 receiving yards versus Utah State. Still a WR1. That San Jose State offense has gotten a little stagnant lately. They're not as exciting with Cordero, but he's still the guy there. I like him to have, somewhere between 75 to 80 in most games. So I'm definitely hitting his over 68.5 receiving yards. And then on the passing yard side, let's see, what was it here? See if it changed. Okay, Jake Haener. Did you scroll to the bottom? Jake Haener, 305.5. Not seems like a lot, I'm sure, but Nevada is just god awful. Like, their coach leaves for same conference, more money, and they lose every weapon except for Toa basically, and I guess Lee, and they just can't stop anyone. And Fresno State, they lost Haener early in the season. He couldn't seem to get healthy for a long time, gets back into the lineup, and suddenly their offense kicks it back into high gear. He's throwing the football everywhere, 394 against San Diego State. They're at least decent defensively. And then the game against Hawaii, everybody should kicks them 327-4, and that was a blowout win, 55-13, and he's still throwing the rock around. And then another 313 last week against UNLV. That game ended up being a little bit closer than it was heading into the second half. He's just getting a lot of passing volume. So I would have preferred it to be like 295 or something and have a little bit more room there. But I think Haener's just going to continue to throw the ball. There's a lot of time to make up for missing. This was supposed to be a big season where he kind of proved himself as a NFL prospect, and he has these last couple of games to do so. So look for him to throw, like 330 or more against Nevada and Mims. It's not like Mims is a bell cow. He's the number one running back for them, but they don't really feed him like a bell cow as much. They throw the football a lot. That's kind of how they do things. So over 305.5 for Haener. And then I have a couple more, but I got to find them. Do you have some handy?
I will take this opportunity to tell a tilt story.
All right, good.
So because I had done pretty well on college basketball during the week last week, props to you and Stills, man. You guys were just absolutely crushing it. I know nothing about college basketball, but was up into like five figures on PrizePicks pretty quickly due to some of those hitting, and just went a little bit nuts with the college football stuff and had a little bit more bankroll to play with than I usually do. And very early in the week, I was hitting the North Carolina Wake game every which way that I could. And so I was, daughter was down, and A.T. Perry there's like maybe 7 minutes left. A.T. Perry needed one catch for 7 yards, and it would have been worth about $10,000 based on all the prize picks that either his fantasy score or his yardage would have gone over if he got one catch for 7 yards. And so the first drive that I watch after putting my daughter to bed, first play, throwed him on the sideline, can't get the feet in bounds, can't hang on to the ball, but hey, at least they're throwing to him. Second play, throwed him like 40 yards downfield. He makes an amazing catch. All of the overs just hit, and then the holding penalty comes out. And so catch goes away. And then Hartman takes a sack or something, and they just don't even get the ball back the rest of the game. And so I'm like, come on. Get him just one more opportunity. So it was like that, obviously still ended the week on a very, very, very high note on PrizePicks, but it was like, oh, I could have doubled up right there. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to stay away from my anti-A.T. Perry bias. Cause everyone else had an amazing game. Morin went nuts. Donovan Green went nuts. It's not like Perry was terrible. Like 7 for 63. didn't get me quite to where I needed to be though. So yeah, man, that was a little bit rough, but we'll go get it again, and maybe AT Perry can make up for it this week. Not super involved on any of his prize picks thus far. I do like the narrative that we talked about in the Discord a little bit earlier this week with Jalen Hyatt, and that being, I don't know, not exactly a revenge game, but like a, hey, I want to show you what you're missing kind of game after South Carolina not having offered him despite being kind of his home school. And then, so just to clarify, highlight over 17.5 fantasy points. I think you're looking at probably 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown seems very doable, especially even without the narrative, but especially if there's some narrative. And then Jordan Addison, rivalry game over 75.5, I think is a lock. Probably will get that by the second quarter. He is going to be a full go. He would have been a full go last week had they not been up by 1 billion points on Colorado right away. And, he was still involved in the first quarter. And then they were just like, well, we could just hand off because we don't want to get anyone else hurt because Travis Dye is already gone. So it does matter against UCLA, and they're going to get him heavily involved in that game early. And then Judkins, not because I think it's like, particularly amazing matchup or anything like that, but because he's Judkins, and 21.5 is a lot, but the dude like just gets 100 yards and 2 touchdowns every game. Like literally just that's in his box score every game. So going to go over Judkins 21.5. And I feel like that's one that's probably going to move a little bit. So probably hit that sooner than later. That's kind of all that I got right now.
Yeah, so I like those. I have 2 more, and circling back to the Tennessee game, Hendon Hooker, South Carolina. I think he'll show off his legs a little bit in this game as well. South Carolina's rush defense is kind of really their weak point, and I think that the Vols are going to score a lot, and they've shown that even in games that do tend to blow out, they'll play their guys deep into it, and Hooker's sitting there at 25.5 fantasy points. So I feel like 30 is his floor in this spot. So I definitely like that. And then going to George Holani, who since they've, kind of gone with a new regime, new quarterback, has looked much like the older George Holani, who was, just kicking ass and really just being a really solid fantasy asset. He's at what is it? 100.5 rushing yards versus Wyoming. I feel like he's just going to be getting a heavy volume in this particular spot. Wyoming has a good running game in themselves, but I think Kalani's going to end up rushing for 110, 120 at minimum. And this offense is just way better now with Green under center. So those are the 2 others that I'm looking at: Hooker fantasy and Holani rush yards. All right, so just a quick couple of bets, and then we'll pretty much be done. I have San Jose State plus 1.5 going in against Utah State on the road. Just basically like them on money line as well. I think that they're going to win. These are later ones. And then Hawaii is at home against UNLV plus 11. Both teams are awful at this point. UNLV is just suffering millions of injuries. Robbins is back, though. He'll probably rush for like 200 and a couple of touchdowns, but it's always tough to go and play a late night game in Hawaii. There's something about that teams struggle with. I think they'll be able to at least cover, probably not win, but definitely cover. Would love to take Colorado plus 30 against my Huskies, but I won't do that out of pure principle. But I don't know. I don't know if we'll beat them by 30. Hopefully, we'll see. And then the other one that I really quite like is Liberty minus 10 against Virginia Tech. Even I wrote that in the free betting piece, even without Day Hunter for the rest of the season, which is a damn shame. I think Virginia Tech's just really not very good, and they won't be able to stop Liberty's offense, and especially with their Lewis, who's their backup running back. I think he'll just take over and gash them. So I like them to cover by more than 10 there. And then one more road dog, the UConn Huskies, the mighty UConn Huskies, the former champs, if depending on who you talk to, plus 10.5 against Army. Army's a tough spot. They'll have the football a lot and run the clock out, but that's going to go in UConn's favor. UConn they beat Liberty. They beat UMass. They beat Boston College. They're on a winning streak. They've won 5 of their last 6. This is the mighty Huskies. So I'm taking them plus 10.5 against Army. I think they'll keep it close, and it'll be to their benefit that Army's going to mess around and run the clock out. As far as props go, I haven't dug in as deep there. They didn't have a whole lot up when I looked this morning, but they have some up now, and it's mainly the rushing yards, which let's just double check what it is before I delve into that. What is it here? I'm liking the Maccabee play. 74.5 rushing yards on DK, minus 115. I just don't see how he doesn't rush for 100 plus against them. That just seems way too easy. And then there's Braylon Allen, which they have at 109.5. I'm expecting a really vintage big Braylon Allen experience, so I'm hoping that he delivers that for us. I think he hits that too. That's more of a bonus play. I'm all over the Maccabee. That just seems way too obvious, so he'll probably get 20 yards, I'm sure. That is pretty much it. Bets, PrizePicks, DFS. We're super efficient. We're the Kendra Miller of the DFS community here. Just over an hour. We have covered everything that I think we need to. Jake, is there anything you want to talk about? We have a little bit of time here. If you want to mention anything else that you're working on, or any line in the sand type play that you really want to throw in there, if you have an extra one that you didn't talk about. Otherwise, we'll head on out.
Yeah, I guess it is kind of cheesy to go with the line in the sand being Tank Dell week, because I think everybody's going to be doing that. Let's see who are we going to go with? It's a little bit off the beaten path. Yeah, let's go Cam Ward week. We're gonna go Cam Ward for 303 scores, and he's also gonna rush one in, and he's gonna break the hearts of Nakia Watson, who goes for 10 or 1573 and no touchdowns.
I could totally see that. That would be hilarious. I like that. I like that call. For me, I'll throw one in too. I think Xavier Worthy has one of those broken play 80-yard long touchdowns, which will allow him to go over 100 yards for only the second time this season, which is crazy to think about. But I just feel like a massive Xavier Worthy game is coming, and I think he'll go a little bit overlooked, or at least I hope he does. But that's it. We did it. I appreciate everybody. Back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. to cover the Saturday college basketball slate, and then 8 a.m. on Saturday. Articles galore the rest of the week. Jake, of course, will be covering the night slate there, which he's been killing it. Definitely check out his stuff, and we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it, and good luck to everyone.